Ned, tell us a little bit about Water for People and how this works, how emergency response ties in with your efforts to bring water to schools and sanitation and other projects around the world.
Water for People's role is more long-term. It's once the immediate needs of people, giving them some shelter, getting water, getting some food on the table, helping them find their families, helping them to begin to reconstitute their lives again. Water for People is there to begin rebuilding these communities around water supply and sanitation. One of the biggest entry points that we find is around schools. It's really important to try to get these communities and children back into their daily routine as fast as possible. And so Water for People works very hard once the immediate needs of emergency have been addressed to begin to reconstitute and reconstruct these communities.
What are the challenges in rebuilding that community?
One of the things that I think Mercy Corps really excels in is my unit is not a fire department. We're not a SWAT team. We don't go in and respond to the emergency and then leave for someone else to come and build. We look from the very earliest moments of an emergency at where our emergency response is going to lead. Now, obviously, when there's a disaster, people's homes are destroyed, as I mentioned earlier, livelihoods are gone, local economies are destroyed. The first thing that people need is very often really basic things like blankets and pots and pans and something to sleep on and basic things like shelter, plastic tarps that they can make into shelter. You have to give them that kind of stuff. The problem is if you keep giving things like that, it makes it more difficult to transition. So you need to, look, as we do, look at the earliest opportunities to get away from giving away stuff to empowering people to get it for themselves. And one of the things we do, for example, very early in the first week of an emergency is we set up what we call Cash for Work programs. We work with communities, we organize members of the communities to do work that community needs desperately. Cleaning up the debris, beginning the rebuilding of schools. It might be a rudimentary school, it could be water points that the community shares, it could be the community market, but we actually pay them to do these basic early on things that need to be done after an emergency. And what does that do? It gives them the money in their pocket to go out and buy what they want. Okay, so that gives them, sort of restores their dignity, their self-confidence. It also begins restoring the markets, which are so important to sustainable reconstruction. If you're giving stuff away all the time, it undermines the recreation of the local marketplace. If you're giving people money to spend, it's really amazing how fast you see it, how fast that market starts to come back together.
And Ned, can you give me an example of that, maybe specifically at a school or something where you've seen this transition take place?
After Hurricane Mitch, Water for People was involved in a range of reconstruction efforts that, in some senses, are quite sad because these communities had been moving in the right direction. They had water supply systems that they were running well, that were being managed effectively, that were linking community water supplies with school water supplies and sanitation. And in some senses, you have to start all over again. The real advantage, though, to being active in these areas and to have a strategic outlook towards them is that rebuilding this is not as hard as you would think once you get the basic infrastructure and basic conditions met, because many of the villages that Water for People has been supporting are villages that have the capacity, have shown the capacity to manage their water system. So it's about rebuilding that. It's about saying that, we're not doing anything new here, we're just reconstituting it. We're going to have to obviously work on some of the construction again because pipes get washed away, the taps get blown away, toilets break down, but at the end of the day, you're starting from a foundation of success as opposed to a foundation of failure.
Sometimes it's the disaster which creates the opportunity for positive change, and we're looking for those countries. I mean, to give you an example, the tsunami, 10 countries affected, right? We responded in 4, which was a lot, but we picked ones where we thought this positive change, there was a great opportunity for it. Aceh in Indonesia had been at war for several generations. The tsunami hit. It completely threw asunder the parties to this conflict. And in fact, now that tsunami was the catalyst to social change in Aceh. And we wanted to be a part of that, and we were.
On May 12th of this year, China was rocked by the deadliest earthquake to hit the country in 30 years. Measuring 8.0 at surface wave magnitude, it devastated the entire region, causing the death of more than 70,000 people and leaving over 4.5 million people homeless. Water supply systems in more than 20 cities and towns suffered critical damage, and more than 1 million people were left with no reliable source of drinking water. Almost immediately, ITT was on the scene. By donating and installing 8 portable water purification units at selected shelters throughout the province, ITT provided nearly 55,000 litres of safe drinking water per day for quake victims, enough to satisfy more than 200,000 thirsty people. ITT sent technicians to ensure proper installation of the units and to train local relief workers how to operate them. ITT has a strong desire to continue its legacy of helping people during global catastrophes, and its partnership with Mercy Corps will allow ITT to do even more.